In the turbulent world of the young and the restless, few betrayals cut as deeply as the moment when love, trust, and loyalty collide in the most devastating way imaginable. For Diane Jenkins, the night that shattered her heart began like any other uneasy evening in Genoa City, yet it quickly spiraled into a nightmare she never expected to live through. Diane had been trying for weeks to rebuild stability in her complicated life with Jack Abbott. Their relationship had survived countless storms, family feuds, corporate wars, secrets from the past, and the lingering shadows of rivals who never seemed to disappear. Diane believed that despite everything, she and Jack were finally moving toward a peaceful chapter. But in Genoa City, peace rarely lasts and old ghosts always return at the worst possible moment. One of those ghosts was the unpredictable and dangerously obsessed Patty Williams, a woman whose long history with Jack was tangled with obsession, jealousy, and emotional chaos. That night, Diane had returned home earlier than expected. The air felt strangely tense even before she reached the front door. The lights were dim, and the silence inside the house felt heavy, almost suffocating. Diane called out Jack's name softly at first, expecting to hear his reassuring voice from another room. When there was no response, a flicker of unease passed through her mind. She stepped further into the house, her heels echoing against the polished floor as she moved down the hallway. Somewhere deep inside, an instinct warned her that something wasn't right. The quiet was wrong, the energy was wrong, and the sense of comfort she usually felt in Jack's home had been replaced by something cold and unfamiliar. As Diane approached the bedroom, she noticed the door was slightly open. A soft murmur of voices drifted through the crack. At first, she couldn't quite make out the words, but the sound alone sent a chill through her. Jack's voice was unmistakable, low, tense, almost conflicted. And then there was another voice. A voice Diane recognized instantly. Patty. Her heart began pounding in her chest as the realization hit her like a wave crashing against stone. Patty Williams had been causing chaos around Genoa City again, but Diane never imagined she would be here, in Jack's most private space. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Diane pushed the door open. The sight that greeted her felt like time itself had frozen. Jack and Patty were together on the bed, caught in a moment that instantly destroyed the fragile trust Diane had fought so hard to rebuild. The room seemed to spin around her as disbelief flooded her mind. Diane's worst nightmare had become reality. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Jack's face drained of color the second he saw Diane standing in the doorway. Patty's expression, however, was far more complicated. There was a flicker of surprise, but also something darker, something almost triumphant. Diane felt the air leave her lungs. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. She had prepared herself for many possible betrayals in her life, but this one cut deeper than any before it. Jack, the man she believed understood her better than anyone else, had allowed Patty, the woman who had once terrorized their lives, to slip back into his orbit in the most intimate way imaginable. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Her voice, when she finally spoke, trembled with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. Jack, what is this? She asked, though the answer was painfully obvious. Jack scrambled to explain, his words stumbling over one another as he tried to form a coherent sentence. He insisted that things weren't what they looked like, that Patty had come to him in a moment of emotional crisis, and that he had been trying to help her. But the explanation only made the situation feel more surreal. Diane stared at him, searching his eyes for the truth she had always relied on. Instead, she saw confusion, guilt, and something else, fear. Patty, meanwhile, sat silently, watching the entire confrontation unfold with unsettling calm. For Patty Williams, emotions had always been unpredictable and intense. Her past obsession with Jack had led to some of the most dangerous moments Genoa City had ever witnessed. Many believed she had finally moved on, but clearly that wasn't the case. Seeing Diane standing there, heartbroken and stunned, seemed to awaken a twisted sense of satisfaction in Patty. She spoke softly but deliberately, reminding Diane that Jack had once cared deeply for her as well. Her words carried a tone that suggested this moment had been inevitable, as though destiny itself had pushed Jack and Patty back together. Diane's heartbreak quickly transformed into anger. She refused to let Patty manipulate the situation with emotional games. Turning back to Jack, she demanded the truth, no excuses, no half-answers. Jack tried desperately to explain that Patty had shown up unexpectedly, that she had been emotionally fragile, and that he had been trying to calm her down. But the circumstances made his story almost impossible to believe. The damage had already been done the moment Diane opened that door. The confrontation escalated as Diane's pain poured out in waves. Years of complicated history with Jack came rushing back in that moment. She reminded him of every promise they had made to each other, every battle they had fought together, every enemy they had faced side by side. To see all of that crumble because of Patty felt unbearable. Jack pleaded with Diane not to walk away, insisting that whatever had happened could still be fixed. But trust, once shattered, is not easily repaired. As the argument grew more intense, Patty suddenly interjected with a shocking revelation. She claimed that Jack had been conflicted about his relationship with Diane for weeks. According to Patty, Jack had confided in her about doubts he had been afraid to voice. The room fell silent again as Diane looked at Jack, waiting to see whether he would deny Patty's accusation. Jack hesitated for just a second too long, and that hesitation spoke louder than any words could. For Diane, that brief pause felt like confirmation of her worst fears. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of Patty. Her voice grew colder as she told Jack that the man she thought she knew would never have allowed something like this to happen. Without another word, Diane turned and walked out of the room, leaving both Jack and Patty behind. Downstairs, Diane's mind raced as she struggled to regain control of her emotions. Betrayal had been a recurring theme in her life, but this moment felt different. This time, it wasn't just about love, it was about dignity, respect, and the realization that some wounds never truly heal. She wondered whether Patty had orchestrated the entire situation, knowing exactly how to provoke the most devastating reaction possible. If that was Patty's plan, it had worked perfectly. Upstairs, Jack confronted Patty with growing frustration. He demanded to know whether she had deliberately manipulated the situation to create the illusion of betrayal. Patty responded with a cryptic smile, suggesting that perhaps the truth was more complicated than Jack wanted to admit. She reminded him that emotions can blur boundaries, especially when two people share a long and intense history. Meanwhile, Diane stepped outside into the cool night air, trying to steady herself. The lights of Genoa city shimmered in the distance, a reminder that life continued moving forward no matter how painful the moment felt. But Diane knew one thing for certain: nothing between her and Jack would ever be the same again. The image of Jack and Patty together would haunt her thoughts, a permanent reminder of the night her trust was broken. As the drama unfolded, the ripple effects of this betrayal began spreading throughout Genoa city. Friends and family would soon learn what had happened, and opinions would clash over whether Jack had truly betrayed Diane or whether Patty had once again manipulated everyone around her. One person who might soon become involved was the powerful and calculating Victor Newman. Victor had always kept a close eye on the Abbott family, and any scandal involving Jack Abbott was bound to catch his attention. In the days that followed, the emotional fallout would only intensify. Diane would be forced to decide whether forgiveness was even possible. Jack would struggle to prove that his intentions had not been as heartless as they appeared. And Patty Williams, ever unpredictable, might reveal that her role in the entire situation was far more calculated than anyone realized. What began as a single shocking moment in a bedroom had quickly evolved into a full-blown emotional earthquake that threatened to reshape relationships across Genoa city. Hearts had been broken, secrets had been exposed, and the fragile balance of trust between Diane and Jack had been shattered. In true the young and the restless fashion, the consequences of that one devastating discovery would echo for weeks, leaving viewers wondering whether love could survive betrayal, or whether some wounds were simply too deep to heal. The emotional shock of that devastating moment continued to echo long after Diane Jenkins walked out of the room, leaving Jack Abbott and Patty Williams behind in stunned silence. The air inside the Abbott home felt suffocating, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension that had just exploded. Jack ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room with growing desperation. He knew the damage done in those few seconds might be impossible to undo. Diane hadn't just seen something shocking, she had seen something that looked like absolute betrayal, and appearances in Genoa City often carried more power than the truth itself. Jack turned toward Patty, his voice filled with frustration and disbelief. He demanded to know why she had allowed the situation to spiral so far out of control. In his mind, everything had started as an attempt to calm Patty during one of her emotional breakdowns. She had arrived at his door earlier that evening visibly shaken, claiming she felt alone and abandoned by everyone she once trusted. Jack had always carried a complicated sense of responsibility when it came to Patty. Their past was filled with emotional turmoil, dangerous misunderstandings, and moments when Patty's fragile mental state had pushed her to the edge. Jack believed he had been trying to help her, but now it looked like he had walked directly into a trap. Patty listened to Jack's accusations with an eerie calm that only made the situation feel more unsettling. Instead of reacting defensively, she leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. She reminded Jack that he had chosen to let her inside, chosen to listen to her story, and chosen to comfort her when she broke down in tears. Patty insisted she had never forced him to do anything. According to her version of events, everything that happened between them had been driven by the emotions they both carried from their shared past. Jack shook his head, refusing to accept that explanation. He knew that even if Patty believed her own words, the situation was far more complicated. The real problem wasn't just what had happened between them, it was the fact that Diane had seen it. And Diane's trust had always been fragile. Over the years, their relationship had survived countless betrayals and secrets, but each time it had required tremendous effort to rebuild what had been broken. Now, in a single devastating moment, all of that work seemed to have collapsed. Meanwhile, outside in the cool night air, Diane struggled to steady herself as waves of emotion crashed over her. The image she had witnessed replayed again and again in her mind, refusing to fade. She could still see Jack's shocked expression, Patty's unsettling calm, and the painful realization that everything she believed about her relationship might have been an illusion. For Diane, betrayal was not a new experience. She had faced deception and heartbreak many times before. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that cut deeper than any previous conflict. As she walked down the quiet street away from the Abbott house, Diane began questioning every moment she had shared with Jack in recent weeks. Had he been hiding something from her? Had Patty been secretly manipulating events long before that night? Or had Jack truly been caught in a moment of weakness that spiraled out of control? The questions offered no clear answers, only more confusion and pain. Back inside the house, Jack realized he couldn't waste another second. If there was any chance of repairing the damage, he needed to talk to Diane immediately. Ignoring Patty's attempts to continue the conversation, he grabbed his jacket and rushed out of the house, determined to find Diane before she disappeared completely from his life. Patty remained alone in the bedroom for several minutes after Jack left. The silence allowed her to reflect on everything that had just happened. For a brief moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. But it quickly faded, replaced by the same mysterious calm she had shown earlier. Patty had always been unpredictable, driven by powerful emotions that others struggled to understand. Whether she had deliberately orchestrated the situation or simply allowed it to unfold naturally remained unclear, even to herself. Across Genoa City, rumors were already beginning to spread. In a place where secrets rarely stayed hidden for long, shocking discoveries had a way of traveling quickly through the social circles that connected everyone. It would only be a matter of time before friends and family began hearing whispers about what had happened between Jack, Diane, and Patty. One person who would almost certainly take interest in the scandal was the powerful and ever-watchful Victor Newman. Victor had spent decades engaged in a complicated rivalry with the Abbott family, particularly Jack. Any turmoil within Jack's personal life had the potential to create opportunities for Victor in the business world as well as the social arena of Genoa City. Though Victor might not openly celebrate Diane's heartbreak, he would undoubtedly analyze the situation carefully. As Jack searched the streets for Diane, his thoughts raced with regret. He replayed the evening in his mind, trying to identify the exact moment when everything had gone wrong. When Patty first arrived, she had seemed vulnerable and desperate. She spoke about feeling isolated, misunderstood, and haunted by her past mistakes. Jack had listened out of compassion, believing he could help her regain control of her emotions. But the conversation had gradually become more intense, filled with memories of their complicated history. Patty had reminded him of moments from years ago when they had shared genuine affection before everything fell apart. Those memories had stirred conflicting emotions in Jack: nostalgia, guilt, and a lingering sense of responsibility. When Patty broke down in tears, Jack's instinct had been to comfort her. In that moment, his focus had been entirely on helping someone he believed was suffering. But what started as comfort had blurred into something dangerously ambiguous. And by the time Diane walked into the room, the situation had already crossed a line that Jack knew he should never have allowed. Eventually, Jack spotted Diane standing near a quiet park bench beneath a dim streetlight. She looked distant and lost in thought, as though the weight of the entire night had settled on her shoulders. Jack approached cautiously, unsure whether she would even allow him to speak. When Diane noticed him, her expression hardened instantly. The vulnerability she had shown earlier was gone, replaced by controlled anger and deep disappointment. Jack tried to explain everything that had happened, insisting again that the situation was not what it appeared to be. He admitted that he had made a mistake by allowing Patty to get so close emotionally, but he swore that his feelings for Diane had never changed. Diane listened silently, her eyes fixed on Jack as he spoke. When he finished, she took a long breath before responding. Her voice was calm but filled with pain. She told Jack that trust wasn't just about intentions, it was about boundaries. And in that moment, Jack had failed to protect the boundaries that should have kept their relationship safe. Jack begged Diane not to give up on them. He reminded her of everything they had overcome together and the future they had planned. But Diane wasn't ready to accept his apologies. The shock was still too fresh, the image too vivid in her mind. As the conversation continued, Diane revealed something that caught Jack completely off guard. She admitted that she suspected Patty had deliberately engineered the entire situation. Patty had always been skilled at manipulating emotions, especially when it came to Jack. Diane believed Patty knew exactly how to create a moment that would look like betrayal. Jack considered that possibility carefully. The more he thought about Patty's behavior that evening, the more certain details began to feel suspicious. Her sudden emotional breakdown, the way she had steered the conversation toward their shared past, and the strange calm she displayed when Diane discovered them, all of it suggested that Patty might have had a plan from the beginning. But even if Patty had manipulated events, Jack knew the ultimate responsibility still belonged to him. He had allowed himself to be pulled into a situation that never should have happened. Diane eventually stood up from the bench, signaling that the conversation was over for the night. She told Jack she needed time to think, time away from the chaos and confusion. Before leaving, she made one thing clear: if their relationship was going to survive, Jack would need to prove that Patty no longer had any place in his life. As Diane walked away into the darkness, Jack remained standing under the streetlight, overwhelmed by regret and uncertainty. The future that once seemed so promising now felt dangerously fragile. Back at the Abbott house, Patty sat quietly in the living room, waiting. Whether she was waiting for Jack to return or simply reflecting on the chaos she had helped unleash was impossible to know. But one thing was certain: the fallout from this explosive night was far from over. In the dramatic world of the young and the restless, betrayals rarely end with a single confrontation. Secrets continue to unravel, loyalties are tested, and emotions grow even more intense as the truth slowly emerges. Diane's heartbreaking discovery had set a powerful chain of events into motion, one that could reshape relationships across Genoa City and leave lasting scars on everyone involved. The question now lingering in the air was simple but devastating. Could love truly survive such a betrayal, or had this shocking moment permanently destroyed the fragile bond between Diane and Jack? Only time and the unpredictable twists of fate that define life in Genoa City would reveal the answer. As the night deepened over Genoa City, the emotional shockwaves from Diane's discovery continued to spread. For Jack Abbott, the weight of regret pressed heavily on his shoulders. He returned to the Abbott house hours later, hoping that somehow the situation could still be repaired, but the silence inside the home reminded him how much had already been lost. Every room carried memories of the life he had tried to build with Diane Jenkins, and now those memories felt fragile, almost painful to revisit.